forging her own way in life and encountering lots of challenges and difficulties, and having to be basically her own advocate. So it is, like I said, a beautiful, kind of heart-wrenching, heartwarming at the same time. It definitely brought tears to my eyes at times. I don't remember whether I actually cried or not. I think I probably did. But one of the real selling points of this story is just how fantastic our narrator is. She is plucky, she is vibrant, she is like a true innocent soul that you can't help but strive for. Yeah, I just absolutely adored her. It was like a plucky underdog story, really, and kind of a coming of age to a certain extent. As I mentioned, there are some really difficult, harrowing things that happen in this novel, but in a way, because of our narrator's kind of almost magical innocence and inner beauty, it somehow, it's weird, somehow it made it less harrowing to read because she wasn't describing things in that same way. It's almost like she became this kind of filter, and even though you were aware of how awful some of the stuff was, I think it didn't make it as much of a challenge to read as sometimes these things can be if they're like overdone, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense at all. But yeah, there are themes in this book around found family, around the kind of hardships that women face, particularly in traditional societies, the problems with extreme religion, what else? Also, yes, the importance of education is a theme that happens throughout, so the title actually refers to that. So Aduni wanted to have a voice and be able to kind of advocate for herself, be counted as a member of society, to have a voice essentially, and the idea is that education will give her that voice, but also kind of give her this loud voice in order to challenge and stand up for herself and things. So that's why it's the girl with the louding voice. It's around having a voice for yourself and getting that and attaining that through education. This is actually quite funny at times as well because of how Aduni describes things. Again, kind of through her sort of naivety almost, and the fact that she just says things as she sees it can be quite amusing as well. And yeah, so at one point in the book she discovers this fact book about Nigeria, and I quite like that pretty much every chapter from that point onwards starts with a little fact about Nigeria, and then that is related to something that will happen in the chapter, which was quite nice to learn more about the country as well. So yeah, I absolutely loved this book, and I do highly recommend it as a really fantastic piece of general fiction. So yeah, like I said, probably an 8.5 out of 10. And the next book I read on my Kindle, and that was something that is very popular, I've seen all over the place and been very intrigued by, and that is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. So I wouldn't say this is the complete opposite, but very, very, very different to the first book. This is a kind of not even post-apocalypse, kind of during the apocalypse kind of book, where our daughters who are grown up, so they're all in their 20s, and the setting is on their family farm. They have a cherry orchard, and it is actually set in COVID times, which is why the three daughters are back at the farm and they are helping to harvest the cherries. But simultaneously hearing this story about their mother's past life, essentially, and it is dual timeline, so we do go back in time and see that love affair happening, and that is all kind of revolves around them acting in a play. They're cast in a play at Tom Lake. So Tom Lake is the name of a theatre boy, is this a horror book. This is really, really horrifying. And actually I've seen this on lists of the scariest books that people have ever read, which I think is valid on the kind of fearometer of completely unbothered as a 1 to having to sleep with the lights on at a 10. I think I got up to about a 5 or a 6, which is good for me. And there was one moment where I really felt it starting to build, but unfortunately that didn't actually last that long. But it has given me a good direction to go in for another book that I might read that could really scare me. So I gave this 8.5 out of 10, and this could have been even higher. This could have been a 9 or a 9.5, except there was one thing that bothered me, like a plot hole that I couldn't look past, but I might mention that at the end of this little review. So if you don't want to know any spoilers, I will of course mention before I talk about it again, but you can skip ahead probably like, knowing me, like 6 or 7 minutes. So yeah, the premise for this book, I actually haven't read any of the backs yet, have I? So let's read the back on this one. At the top it says, what happens when one simple innocent decision becomes a catastrophic mistake? Craving an adventure to wake them from their lethargic Mexican holiday before they return home, a group of 4 friends impulsively set off in search of one of their own who has travelled to the interior to investigate an archaeological dig in the Mayan ruins. After a long journey into the heart of the jungle, the group come across a trail. A hillside covered in bright red flowers lures them closer. A Mayan horseman approaches behind them, but this is no friendly welcome. He has a gun and orders them away fiercely. In the midst of the confrontation, one of the group steps inadvertently backwards into the flowering vine, and at that moment their world changes forever. So yeah, this has a lot of different horror elements to it. So there is a suspense, there is a survival horror, and there is a lot of body horror and gore in this as well as a kind of supernatural vibe to it, to a certain extent, in terms of what is in this isn't actually in reality. So yeah, with the body horror, there was one moment where I was reading it, and then I had to cover my face. I had to just impulsively, just instinctively put my hands over my face because what I was reading was that horrific and shocking, so shocking. And I spilled tea all over myself. surviving in difficult situations. It's a proper survival situation, with, you know, rationing out food and having to work out how you're going to live within your environment. That was amazing and so well done in terms of the dynamics of it, and it was also thought-provoking at times, which you wouldn't always expect from a book like this, because, you know, the question is, how far would you go to survive in certain circumstances? And it really does, I guess, make you think about what you would be willing to do. You know, how quickly your world can go from normal comforts to needing to do things in order to survive. So yeah, that's my general thoughts. I am going to spoil it now by talking about, well, I'm going to have to talk about a little bit about the setup, but also about the thing that I see as a little bit of a plot hole, a thing that I don't really understand, and if that changed, if the aspect of it changed like it should do in my head, means this whole book wouldn't exist. So that's why I can't possibly give it a 10 or even a 9. So yeah, as it said on the back, basically the group, they get stuck on this hillside because once one of the group has stumbled into the vines, the Mayans descend on them. They surround the hillside with bows and arrows, and one of them has a pistol, and they essentially set up a sentry, because they can't let them leave the hillside now that they've stood on it. But they didn't actually want them to go there. The Mayans were trying to get them to go back and not go to the hillside. And I don't really understand why the Mayans couldn't have set up, like, they tried to hide the entrance to the trail that gets there with leaves, and so it wasn't obvious, but this group managed to find it anyway. But why didn't they set up some signs instead of just covering up the entrance? Why didn't they write some signs that said danger? And they could have, I know that the Mayans didn't speak English, but I'm sure there could have been a way to convey, if you cross this line, you will die, we will kill you, not good. They could have even used bones or something to be like, don't go this way, do not go there, because the Mayans didn't really want the people to be there. They didn't want to hurt them. They didn't want to wait around the bottom of the hillside and trap them there while awful things happen. And I don't understand why they just didn't set up a sign, because in the book someone else had tried to set up a sign at the very bottom of the hill that had been maliciously removed by the evil forces in this book. But the Mayans could have set up a sign further away from the hill. I don't understand. Make it make sense. So yeah, that was like the thing that I couldn't stop thinking about with this. It's still such a good book though. Okay, I was gonna say we're down to our last book, but we're not, because we still have to talk about War and Peace. So yeah, I need to get my skates on, I think. Anyway, a much shorter book to talk about now, which is The Employees by Olga Raven, and it is translated by Martin Aitken from Dutch, I believe. Not Dutch, Danish, I think. Yeah. and yet feel it deeply, truly. As their testimonies accumulate, a tapestry of longing and quiet rebellion emerges, blurring the lines between work and life, between human and machines. And this is, like I think I said already, super experimental. It is actually a collection of statements collected by different employees, and they're actually out of order, and some of them are missing, and you don't know who's speaking. It just says statement 53, statement 2, statement 7. It doesn't tell you who's being interviewed and whether they're human or humanoid. So you have to kind of try and piece the puzzle a little bit together, although you never get there, at least I didn't. But I did really enjoy this book for how novel it was, and the fact that it was quite thought-provoking around certain topics, obviously particularly around the human versus humanoid AI intersection, the differences, the commonalities, what makes us human, all those kind of questions, which are obviously becoming ever more pertinent to real life. It did take me a while to get into, and then I was really enjoying it, but then I was also quite ready for it to end. I did try to read this in one sitting, just with a few breaks for various things, which I think is probably the best way to do it. And because it is very short, it's only about 120 pages, and obviously, there's not full of writing on each one, but I found myself rereading sentences and paragraphs multiple times in order to fully take in the meaning, to kind of digest it, to understand what was happening. I mean, as much as I said, this is not something where you have all the answers. I don't even think this is something that has a fully fleshed out story, in so much as it I don't know even if the author really fully knew everything that was going on. So if you're looking, for a plot-driven book, this is not it. If you're looking for a character-driven book, this is not it. This is really just philosophizing. That's not right. Thinking about stuff, meditations on things, and just a unique experience. Like, I'm glad I read it, but I didn't love it. What did I give it? I gave it 7.5 out of 10. And I did quite a lot of tabs, which I don't normally do. elation and satisfaction and happiness and closure that I finished this behemoth of a book. I didn't get that, unfortunately, mainly because of the epilogue and how annoying Tolstoy was at points in this book. So yeah, this is translated by Anthony Briggs, and I feel like I was gaslit into being told that War and Peace is a work of fiction, an epic tale about these characters in Russia dealing with the Napoleonic Wars, la 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 la. And yeah, half of it is about that, but I wouldn't say that the characters were that really engaging to me. I didn't feel that connected to the characters. But the main problem with this book is that, well, I don't know how much of a proportion of it, but a lot of this book, especially the further you get in this book, becomes Tolstoy opinionating, or opining is the word, isn't it? Tolstoy giving us his opinion, talking to you like it is a history lecture or a debate about the correct versions of history and how historians approach telling what happened. And yeah, there was a lot of this. It was non-fiction. I read non-fiction when I know it's non-fiction, and even then I don't do it very often. So yeah, I just did not appreciate that whatsoever. Let's see what else I wrote down about this. So I've given it 5 out of 10, and it was going to be about a 6.5, and then the epilogue happened, and that just really reduced it even more. I have to say that I did do a fair amount of audiobook listening on this, so if you've watched some of my previous videos, you'll know about 10 years ago I read the first half of it and then gave up, so I re-listened to the first half on audiobook in order to get myself back to that spot without having to spend the time reading it. And then the plan was that I was just going to read the rest of it, but because I wasn't really enjoying it and I wasn't connected to it, I struggled to make myself read as much of it as I would have wanted. So I reckon of the 50% that I hadn't read previously, I reckon it was probably about 50-50 audio and reading, maybe even 60-40 in favour of audio. So yeah, about a 5 out of 10. I just put, he needs an editor. He needed someone to edit this. I guess part of the problem that I had with it was maybe, it is set into different parts and different books. So maybe the idea is that you would read them as books in a big series, but I still don't think that would have helped, because I don't think the pacing would have worked out very well for that. I think you'd have finished one part and just not been bothered to pick up the next part, so I don't necessarily think that would have solved the problem. So in terms of the actual story, like I said, I didn't really connect to the characters. I don't know if it's because it was too broad and too meandering with too many breaks and chopping and changing. Some of the characters were okay, but I honestly found myself kind of enjoying the parts with the kind of more villainous figures and almost rooting for them a little bit, because at least they were interesting. So Helene, who is married to Pierre, and Anatoly, who is actually her brother, because they were, something a bit different, and yeah, not this kind of preachy character. I mean, yeah, a lot of them did annoy me, I'm not gonna lie. So in terms of the writing, when it wasn't a kind of soapbox, kind of old man shouting at clouds vibe, the writing was okay. There were some quite beautiful quotes, I would say, but I just feel like I'm left with quite a sour taste in my mouth. And so yeah, in terms of the epilogue, saw a spider. It's not. How leaders can gain authority, become authoritarians, and either take the will of the people and exploit that, or essentially convince the people that there's a will there in the first place, and go and do atrocious things and get thousands of people killed in unnecessary wars and things like that. I think the element that he's kind of missing, and goes on a massive 50-page tangent about talking about how wrong history is and la la la, is just the idea of human psychology. And maybe because that wasn't really studied and understood in Tolstoy's time, and I should